I'm Chip Townsend, and this is the Team Chip Podcast. All right, guys, welcome back to the Team Chip Podcast. Hey, I'm going to say it again. I'm pumped to be here, and I'm more pumped than ever today because I have a super special man with me on the other end. We're going to be streaming today with the one and only Mr. Cory Wilson. And you're probably wondering, some of you might have heard the name, some of you might not have, but like, what makes this guy so special? Well, this is my nephew, a young man that I got to spend a lot of time with kind of in his development years, and we just got to spend a lot of time together. Very special kid. Came and stayed with me in the summers a lot, earned his black belt with us in our traditional Taekwondo program as a young man, and is now in Omaha, Nebraska, a jiu-jitsu practitioner. He is a practicing attorney, has his own law firm, and I am just unbelievably proud of and honored to have this man on my podcast. Cory, how are you doing today, bud?
Doing good, but not feeling quite as young or as kiddish as you explained. I'm 38 now, so gonna have to cut back on the kid stuff.
I'm sorry, man. It's hard because seeing you grow up, but you're still, yeah, I love you. I know you're a man, but you're my nephew always, and it's like, but anyway, super special.
Well, the mobility in my hips would indicate that I'm not as young as I used to be, if that means anything. So,
Welcome to the club, brother.
yeah.
Welcome to the aging club. All right, guys. So today, Cory, just real quick, give us a little bit of background on your law firm and how things are going for you and what you got going there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up, as working in the oil field. All the drilling rigs got laid down in 2008, somewhere around then, and then wound up looking for a job, and the railroad was hiring. They were looking for somebody to dig ditches, and so I was like, I can do that. So started digging ditches, showing up every day, and one thing led to another. Wound up in Omaha, Nebraska, where Union Pacific's headquarters are. And during that time period, we're putting my wife through nursing school. She wound up going and becoming a nurse practitioner. And around the time that she was graduating, I had also been going to school at night and while I was working. And I kind of said one day to her, I said, I always thought about being a lawyer. And I thought she would say, no way, we're done with school. You got your bachelor's degree. I've got my degree. Let's go and, do grown up stuff. And she completely called my bluff and said, all right, we'll go do it. And so I called my bluff on that. And I had to go and take the LSAT just to prove I wasn't lying. Wound up becoming a lawyer, working at a pretty good sized firm up here in the Omaha metro area, and love the people that work there, but just didn't love the business model. And I looked at it and I said, the way law works, it's very billable hour centric. I didn't think it was good for our clients. I didn't think it was good for the attorneys that work there. So I set out to start my own practice that was a little more focused on the results that we got for our clients. Nobody is sitting around saying, this year for Christmas, I'm going to get my wife an attorney. You see these billboards on the side of the road, and nobody wants an attorney. What they want the results that an attorney can get them, kind of like a plumber.
Right.
I know lots of great plumbers, but I really don't want to pay to have a plumber come hang out in my house.
That means you have a problem.
I want to have my pipes working and my water running and my drains draining.
Right.
And I just thought that there was a real need for that, to start a business that was really focused on results, and the results that an attorney can get you, and if you need them, but also likewise telling you when you can't get those results. I mean, they're practitioners, they're not wizards. And I tell my clients that all the time. They're like, hey, I want this to happen. And I'm like, hold on a second. I'm a lawyer, not a wizard. So I can't help you. But there's a lot of, there's a lot of scrupulous attorneys out there that will lose for a living, because they get paid by the hour to do it. And so we just built a practice that is really focused client centric on how can we get results. And then almost as importantly is we have a kind of a motto in our firm or a question, I guess, a guiding question where we say, does this make sense? does it make sense for our clients and does it make sense for our staff and our attorneys?
Right.
And so whenever we're trying to decide what we're going to do, are we going to take this case? It could be crazy profitable for us, but does it
Right.
make sense? Is this the kind of case you want to like lose sleep out on overnight? Is this the kind of client you want to work with?
Right.
Are there goals and ambitions in their case? Do they align with who we are morally
Right.
and ethically? And we just built the practice around that, and it's really taken off, and it's growing crazy, and it's going great.
Very cool. So, a couple of things I want to throw in here. If you're listening and you're hearing what this guy is saying, uh, integrity, he's got heart, he's got passion, he's doing it for the right purposes. He's a man of God, very much. And I think these are all things that really matter. So, if you're a martial artist or a martial arts school owner and operator out there, it might behoove you to reach out to this guy if you ever need law help because you're certified, if I am understanding correctly, in quite a few states, right, Core?
Yeah, that's so I'm licensed in Iowa, Nebraska, and Texas. And
Got
then
it.
we have attorneys in our firm that are licensed between all of us: Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri,
Got it.
Texas. We hit a pretty big swath of the
Swath, right?
Midwest and the
Midwest.
South. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. So if you're listening and you need a solid attorney that understands martial arts business, and by the way, Cory has helped me for years now as someone that kind of consults with me on how we structure our business, our affiliate program, and a lot of our stuff, and has been amazing to work with. So anyway, side note: if you need someone, this guy's the guy to reach out to. Give us your website. It's Resolute Law. So tell us what the website is.
Yeah, so we're a little late to the scene on the URL thing. So it's Resolute Law LLC.com.
Very cool. ResoluteLawLLC.com. I love it. All right, man. So today we're going to talk a little bit, Cory. I've got this guy on to give us some direction on kind of a checklist if you want to own your own school, if you want to own your own business. I think these are transferable. Would you agree, Cory, that across any business really?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I think
Mhm.
for in most cases, particularly for small businesses, there's just a little checkup, health check type of list, things that you need to be doing. They're not always intuitive, or
Right.
sometimes it's like any type of discipline. We know we need to be eating our vegetables and our good proteins and all that stuff, but
Right.
or getting to the gym, it's just a matter of doing it and being
Mhm.
disciplined with it. So all of those things are important.
Absolutely. It's funny you said that because last night, walking out of a jujitsu class, I heard someone say, sometimes it's hard to get here, but I never feel bad after being here. And
Oh
that's
yeah,
exactly what you're talking about. It's that I know I need to do this, but I just got to make myself do it sometimes. That's good stuff.
yeah.
Well, so let's talk a little bit, Cory, about kind of if someone, let's just start at the very beginning. Someone is starting to think, I want to be a business owner. Let's say we'll use martial arts. Someone's been training for years. Maybe they move away from their home school. I would not encourage you to open up in your town and compete with the person that kind of raised you and mentored you and guided you. But you move away and you go, you know what? I'm not finding a school I'm comfortable with. I get these calls all the time from guys that trained with us for years, and they go, they've moved to Washington D.C., they've moved to South Dakota, North Dakota, they moved all over the place, and they go, hey, I'm looking everywhere for school and I can't find one. And sometimes I encourage them like, hey, maybe open your own place. So someone wants to open their own place, go kind of from just being maybe an instructor or a student in a school to an owner. There's got to be a mindset shift in there. So talk to us a little bit about that from your perspective, what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think the first thing people need to kind of get their head wrapped around, and this is not just with martial arts school owners, but
Right.
with anybody that's doing any type of business. So we can do, I mean, a lot of the folks that are going to listen to this are probably in the martial arts world, but and they can relate. Whenever you're doing martial arts, I mean, it's great. You love it, right? It feels good. You love it. But you have to understand that whenever you are going from I do martial arts to I have a martial arts business, you can't lose that operative word that you're actually doing business. If you
Yes.
do something, so which means you have to be or need to be profitable. Otherwise, it's just a hobby.
Right.
So, and that's okay. I think that that's okay, and there's a place for that. And if you say, "I want to do this because I love doing it," I don't care if it makes money. That's okay too. But it still needs to be done so that you're not losing money or you're not putting your family at risk, your personal assets at risk, all of those types of things. So the first thing would be to acknowledge: are you starting a business, or are you creating a self-sustaining hobby
Right.
that you can, where a place where you can do martial arts the way that you want to, and know that. So that's part of like the business planning stuff. And there is, if there's 100, there's a million books on business and how to do that. So I would encourage people to, know, get, if you're not classically trained in school or whatever, to start learning like kind of general principles of business, uh, all of those things, because first and foremost, you have to be a business owner, or at least
Right.
a profitable enough as a hobbyist to support what you do, because you have to have a critical mass. You need, you need infrastructure, you need people, and you need clients. So that would be the first thing that you have to get your head wrapped around, and at least prime your brain to say, this isn't just about me being on the mat and doing and teaching, which I love doing,
Right.
but it's
Mhm.
also about creating a sustainable system that will operate, not just for your
Absolutely.
own good, I don't think, but also for the good of your students.
The
If you're
clients.
running a
Mhm.
if you're running a, a crappy school that doesn't have clean gym and mats and safe equipment and all of that stuff, your clients aren't going to benefit, from your instruction in the first place. So you have to have that you have to be prepared and have a plan for getting that stuff at least at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Uh, I love the idea of, because I've known of many through the last 30 plus years. I've been in martial arts for 40 and 30 plus years of operating a school. People who have stepped out there and said, I'm going to open my own school, and their passion is the mat, and they do love to train, and they open up a school and it fails over a period of time because they don't fully understand that they're operating a business. And so man, if you're hearing this, you really need to listen. The book that I encourage people to read many times when they're young in business, not necessarily young in life, is The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, the entrepreneurial myth. When you read the title, you think electronic myth, but it's the entrepreneurial myth. And he really, in my mind, does a good job of talking about the dichotomy of that technical skill that you have and you're passionate about, whether it's a machine operator or a welder or you're a martial artist, but the importance of the other piece of the dichotomy that has to fit, which is the business that has to operate. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about today is, kind of a checklist for starting a business on the right track and getting getting a plan in place. I think is kind of where what I would say here. So it's super important that we understand we are not just the martial artist, but I'm going to caveat that with, if you truly want the school to be successful as a martial arts school, you need to be a martial artist. And I think you need
Yeah.
to be a martial artist first. Yeah. So you can deliver well. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of reminds me, I this is probably an overused example,
Right.
but there's a common question. Can you make a better hamburger than McDonald's? Right? And
Right.
most people would agree, heck yeah, I get my 80/20 ground chuck out. I'm going to put this seasoning in it and that seasoning in it. I get the coals fired up in the backyard. I make my patties and get some good buns and great ingredients. And I make, a great hamburger. At least most
Right.
people would think that their hamburger that they can make at home is better than what McDonald's does.
Right.
But who sells more hamburgers, right? McDonald's sells a lot of hamburgers, but they have a business, a sustainable business, and
Hmm.
systems and processes and things like that to bring that hamburger to the market. And, for anybody that's starting a business, you might be the very best in the world at what you do. But if you want to do it in a school context, in a martial arts school context, it still has to be a viable business. Otherwise, it's not. It's back to, being a hobby. And a lot of people could go and, you can still teach, martial arts at another school that has that in place and
Right.
raise up that school with your excellent teaching. So I don't think you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you have a school that you fit in and you're a great instructor, or somebody's raised you up in their school, use your instruction ability to do that and make that decision before you decide to start a business.
Absolutely.
But starting a business is a lot of fun, so don't shy away from it if you're ready to make
Right.
that leap and you're in a position, particularly if you've moved or your life is taking you away from the school you grew up in.
Absolutely. It's funny. You were talking about don't shy away from starting a business. And what popped in my head is I wish I could remember where I read it at, but I was reading probably about 3, 4 years ago, and early, maybe 5, gosh, time gets away. But And there, it was in that time whenever millennials were catching all the flack for, not working hard and all these things, millennials this, millennials that. And anyway, this book that I was reading was talking about the time that the millennial generation came along. All of the dangerous, quote unquote, dangerous playground equipment got taken off the playgrounds, and they put pads out. They get rid of the tall slides. They got rid of, anything the kids could fall off of potentially, or high things. And what they're in the book, what they were saying is that they're kind of seeing this trend of those kids that were not allowed to adventure as kids. Now, like 80 or 90%, something like, was this unbelievable percentage, say they would love to be a business owner or have their own business, but they don't have the courage to do it. And so when you said,
Yeah.
by all means, go for it, I think that was kind of interesting. That popped in my head. And I remember thinking, man, that's impactful. We don't let kids get out there and adventure and play hard anymore because we're trying to protect them and give them a good life. And the poor
Yeah.
guys lose all their confidence and don't really develop, right?
Yeah, wait, this is not probably necessarily on topic, but I think it's worth mentioning is whenever I'm coaching jujitsu, particularly in the kids classes, uh, typically we warm up with the traditional front rolls, back rolls, bear
Right.
crawls, shrimp crawls, that kind of stuff. But one day I asked the kids, I said, all right, guys, let's do some cartwheels down the floor. And only two out of about 20 kids on the mat knew how to do a cartwheel.
Do a cartwheel. That's right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, that was just kinda like standard stuff, at one
Whenever
point,
we were
like,
kids. Mm-hmm.
kids just knew how to do it, and, if you broke a radial bone on the way over, I mean, you will be see you in 6 weeks. But, now it's like they don't know how to do it, and,
Right. Right.
they've never done it, and they're 12, 13 years old, so
Right.
there might be something
Absolutely.
to that, so
Absolutely. Well, it's funny because, again, I don't want to stay off track too much, but uh, Dave Kovar, a good friend and mentor, mentions all the time. He, like me, I have quite a few doctors that train in my school. He does in his school and his system as well. And he said, he talks more all the time. And he said to the doctors, and they're saying they see more and more kind of strange injuries with kids, like little wrist issues, and they're attributing it to not as much rough and tumble play. And the martial arts world is a
yeah.
great place to get controlled, safe, rough and tumble play. So anyway, that's a sidetrack. Let's get back to the business here. Legal and financial checklist. What are some of the things we need to be thinking about? Okay, I've decided I'm ready to bite the bullet. I want to be a business owner and a martial artist, and I want to combine those two things to try to make a living. So business formation type stuff. What do we need to be thinking, Cory? Help me out.
Yeah, so first of all, let's just build off of what you said about rough and tumble play.
Okay.
So it is, martial arts is a great place for people of all ages to be engaged in rough and tumble play.
All right.
And with rough and tumble play, you occasionally you're gonna have people that get some lumps and bruises, and that's part of the deal, right? Everybody that's trained in martial arts knows that. But what does that mean for the business? The truth is that most people are not likely going to sue you if something happens on the mat. Most people are not going to sue you if they slip and fall in your lobby. Most people are not going to slip and fall and sue you because of something that happened in your parking lot, but somebody will, right? And so we put those types of liabilities in a category over here that's lives in what we call tort law. It would be like
Right.
premises liability, negligence, gross negligence, those types of things. And so I would just as a brief kind of introduction to the two different primary areas that business owners have. Uh, you have tort liability and you have contractual liability. So tort, T-O-R-T, is like negligence, premises liability, those types of things. And negligence, if you're taking notes, in most jurisdictions, would be defined as somebody has a standard duty of care, they breach that duty of care, somebody has been injured as a result of that breach, and they have damages that are directly and proximately caused by that breach. So an example would be, um, like I have a duty to maintain a safe premises at my martial arts school. And there's up here in Nebraska, we get lots of icy months, icy, snowy months. And the front walk coming into the martial arts school, I haven't put any salt down. And so it's very slick and icy. and somebody walks up onto that front step and they slip, fall, and crack their head on the sidewalk. I had a duty to maintain a safe premises. I breached that duty by not putting some salt or ice melt out on the sidewalk. They have been injured because of that breach of duty that I had, and the damages that they've incurred, that fractured skull or traumatic brain injury or broken wrist or whatever, are directly and proximately tied to my failure to meet that duty. So that is the kind of thing that would be
Right.
considered general negligence. Now, this is important, so I'll say it. So let's change the facts a little bit and say that I know that it's going to be freezing tonight, and I'm out and I'm washing the front of my school with my pressure washer, and there's a bunch of water on the sidewalk, and I've intentionally sprayed, or I've got water left out on the sidewalk, or I just go out there and clean my sidewalk, right, and spray a bunch of water on it, and then say, it might freeze, might not. People got to keep a head on a swivel. And then I just go home for the day. Well, now I have not only negligently done something wrong, I've done something that's grossly negligent,
Right.
meaning
Right.
that I did something that no reasonable person with any kind of common sense would do. And then that breach of that standard of care was almost intentional, or was done without any forethought, or it was
Right. Right.
almost just silly to do, right?
I was
That's
about to
considered,
say, I was about to say, almost kind of stupid to do, right?
yeah, almost stupid, right? That's a way to put gross negligence. So, and then somebody comes, same thing, walk, slip, fall, crack, and they have damages that are direct. So that's gross negligence. Those are the two types of negligence that you have. And then finally, you have contractual liabilities. And that is where, you call the people at, whatever, XYZ martial arts supply, and you say, hey, I would like to get 25 Blastmasters and two wave. Well, those are probably brand specific to Century. So I would like to have 25 standing bags and, 15,
Kick
whatever,
shields. Right.
kick shields. And they say, great. And then they're going to, I agree to pay them, in three payments of whatever, $400, whatever it costs, and I don't pay that bill, or I don't fulfill
Right.
my obligations under the contract, and that's contractual liability, right?
Got it.
So the reason we talk about those three things is because in business, you're constantly being exposed to tort liability in both the form of negligence and gross negligence, and then you're also constantly being exposed to contractual liabilities, and that can be between you and your clients at your school, or that could be between you and vendors, or that could be between you and your landlord. Whatever the case is, we all go into contracts with the best intentions, but sometimes things happen, and then the question becomes, all right, the people that sold you all those standing bags and kick shields, they have a contractual right to be paid for the product that they delivered you. You have a
Right.
contractual obligation to pay them for that, right? You struck a deal, but maybe something happens, and your mom got a cancer diagnosis. You were out on the mats, and tore your ACL, and now you can't teach anymore, and you're a one instructor school, and people aren't coming to class anymore, or maybe your numbers start sliding because you can't work like you used to or teach like you used to, and something bad happens in your business. Well, now you have a liability associated with that. So in either event, whether it's tort or contractual, um, you don't want to be in a position to where somebody, your debtors, or somebody who might have get a judgment against you, you don't want them to be able to come and say, "Hey, you and your family live in a really nice place, but we're going to take it
Right.
because we sued you for $700,000 for that slip and fall, and the traumatic brain injury that happened on the front step of your school." So, what a business does, what kind of formation you want to do, they're almost all nowadays in most states limited liability companies, LLCs.
Right.
So a corporation is a limited liability entity. Whether you're incorporated, that's a different kind of structural framework, probably overkill for most schools. But for most people who are starting a martial arts school, In most states, it'll be a limited liability company, LLC, or if you have a partner, you might consider doing a limited liability partnership,
Partnership, right?
uh, or some other type of limited liability formation, depending on the state that you're in. But the idea is that those companies, they create what we call the corporate veil, and it says we can have a business. This business can operate in and of itself, and we are separate. I'm personally separate from that business.
Right.
So my kids, you can't come and take the furniture out of my kids' room to satisfy that judgment, or you can't take my car, my personal vehicle, or my personal funds out of my account to satisfy some sort of liability that my company had.
Right.
And that protects business owners, encourages businesses to participate in the market because they're not having to expose themselves to all the liabilities of their company. So
Absolutely.
that would be huge. You've got to do that. It's too
You
easy to
gotta you
do.
gotta pick a correct business structure and one that fits for you and one that serves your purpose, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just remember whenever we first took over our school and bought it out from our instructor, we were sole proprietors for a very short period of time. And talking with my CPA, and they were like, "Hey, you really need to set up a structure, like you said, to create that corporate veil to separate you from your business." And we did that many years ago. But I remember them talking about when you set that business structure up, it's its own entity. It aside from you. And so it's just good information for people to know, especially if they're looking into business. You want to be cautious just going out and throwing your shingle on a building and opening it up and taking off with the business without setting up a business structure to operate it under, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a part of that,
Right.
I'm not trying to sell my own wares, or anybody's wares for that matter. But I will tell everybody that's listening this is that at least in our practice, whenever we're setting up a company for somebody, we sit down with them and we really look at, like, how are you doing your business? Where are you operating it? What are your plans for the future? What do you want to do with this thing? What kind of liabilities are you going to have? Are you going to have contractors, or are you going to have employees? And then we build a business around that. Are you going to have partners or not? Are you going to be operating your business with a spouse or a family member? And we go through and really try to take a holistic approach and look at the totality of the circumstances in which you're going to be operating and form that business around it. Now, we have people who all the time they say, well, what does that cost to do that? And to set up a business and to really do it well, I think most places, it's going to be somewhere between, if you go to an attorney, it's going to be somewhere between $700 and $1,000, maybe a little bit more, depending on the market that you live in. And it's worth every penny. It's worth every single penny, because I have right now in my law practice, we just counted them the other day. We have about 15 lawsuits, um, where people have tried to start businesses using, like, online forms, where they've gone online to, Rocket Lawyer, LegalZoom, something like that, which those are fine, but people don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand what they're signing up for, and they're saying, "I don't know what the heck any of this stuff means, but I signed up for it. I've got my name on the dotted line. My partner signed up for it. I registered it with the Secretary of State." Well, you're stuck with the rules you pick for yourself. And for us, I mean, as attorneys, we go to college for 7 years, and even still, every time we have a new business formation come in front of us, we're like, okay, we need to research this. We need to look, like, they're doing business this way. We need to really look in this jurisdiction. What does the case law say about what they intend to do? What their business plan is? Is this going to work the best? And how do we need to modify their operating agreement so that maybe this particular statute, they can waive the protections in this statute in light of their business plan, or maybe they want to strengthen that statute through contract, so that they have additional protections because they're going to be doing something that's kind of out of the ordinary. And you don't get that from just going somewhere and signing up for it. And I thought, like, these LegalZoom things, I was like, man, I picked a bad time to be an attorney, to become an attorney, because everybody's just going to go and do this. And this is going to really hurt our business. And come to find out, it's actually been great for our business. Uh,
All
it's
right.
been horrible for people, but it's been great for our business because people commit to these online forms and documents, and we wind up making 15, 20, 30 times more fixing the problem than we would have just doing the original formation in the first place.
S r Setting it up right in the first, yeah, absolutely. It makes perfect sense and powerful, powerful information for people to understand. Because I know, for us, whenever we first started, we were living on a shoestring most of the
Yeah.
time, and it was like an attorney. No way, we can't afford an attorney. We gotta find a way around that, and so that was kind of the early mindset, but very quickly we realized, okay, this is not good. We've got to understand this stuff and understand the business well. So, and I think that's why, just as an average, they say in business school that most small businesses fail within the first 5 years, like 80 or 90%, something like that. And I think this is a big part of it. They just don't understand what they're signing up for and what they're starting, an actual entity that will stand on its own and needs to have systems and operations and operation manuals to make it work, and they've got to stay within those boundaries. So very, very good stuff. So what are some of the like contracts and agreement type stuff that we need to be aware of? We've talked about the business structure, about the importance of setting that structure up right and having someone help us that understands it. And I will say from my perspective, whenever I start, I look at a contract or I look at some sort of agreement with a lot of legal speak, I right away message you and go, "Hey, Cory, can you please look at this and kind of break this down in layman's terms for me? Help me understand what I'm looking at, and make sure I'm on the right track here." The power of that has been priceless, and I'm thankful for it. So let's talk kind of contracts, agreements, and things like that. What are we looking at? Like, we have building leases and we have all these, we have agreements with our employees, like you mentioned earlier. So run us through a little bit of that real quick.
Yeah, so let's just take a look at the scorecard really quick. The first thing you asked was like kind of what's the first step in my opinion. One, decide that you're going to be, in addition to be a martial artist, you're going to be a business owner. Two, what's the next thing? Get yourself into the correct business formation. But there's really a step 1.5, right? Which is build a relationship with professionals that you need. Um, so I would recommend an attorney. I would recommend somebody that is familiar with taxes, and that way you can get those a CPA, not a bookkeeper. I mean, I love H&R Block or whatever. They can file your returns, but find somebody that says this is how you want to spend your money to save your money to not use it on taxes.
A quick caveat, Corey. I that is another one of the pieces of advice I give young business owners and young in their business all the time. Get a CPA that you can get to know, you can trust, and meet with them regularly, and go through your P&L and go through your books just to make sure things are clear. That saves so much trouble at the end of the year when they're trying to prep your taxes and get things ready for you.
Absolutely. And, maybe it's worth saying because I know we have a lot of martial artists that are going to be listening to this, but think about it like a martial artist. If you are going to go somewhere dangerous, right? And business is dangerous, you're going to go somewhere dangerous, or your spouse is going to go somewhere dangerous, and you need to hire some bodyguards, right? Are you going to say, you know what? I'm going to hire these guys look kind of big, or I'm going to hire these guys. They don't know they don't know how to fight. They don't know how to grapple. They don't know how to defend, any attacks or multiple attackers or weapons. They don't have any of this experience, but I'm going to hire these guys to do it to defend my wife or my kids or myself in this dangerous place. Martial artists would
Right.
say, no, I want somebody that knows how to take a punch and keep hitting. I want somebody that knows how to, defend things. I want somebody who knows how to like
Yes.
observe and see dangerous situations. Well, it's kind of the same thing with your business. Your CPAs or hiring a CPA and hiring an attorney, it should be like hiring a bodyguard, right? Like, hey, I'm building this thing.
Right.
Help me protect it and knock down some hurdles. So we should intuitively as martial artists kind of understand that. But back to what you were saying with contracts, contracts are everywhere. They are
Yes.
everywhere. We sign them all the time. Some of them are just like, click here if you agree to the terms and conditions. When you download that app on your phone,
Yes.
you have no idea what you just signed. You just boop, boop, and you go and you do it. Um, and those aren't usually a problem for people. Sometimes I deal with clients who are like, I got to pay this company, $400 a month for the next 72 months. And they're supposed to run some sort of voice over internet provider service. And I didn't even know. I thought this was a monthly subscription. Well, you probably should have read the terms and conditions. But that's not too common. What I see more than anything is people try to, one, create their own contracts, or two, they've created a contract and they don't realize it. So
Right.
obviously, when somebody hands you a lease agreement, you're like, "Yep, that's a contract. I know what that is. I'm gonna do it." Well, here's a great question. What does it say about abatement? What does it say about tenant improvement? What does it say about the insurance coverage that you're required to have? What kind of indemnification obligations do you have to your landlord? What kind of indemnification obligations does your landlord have to you? Can your
To you.
can your landlord decide, hey, we're redoing the parking lot? My brother-in-law is going to do it. Everything's going to be torn out for a month. So sorry. And then your business is shut down. You don't have anywhere for your clients to go. Have you thought about that? And what kind of contractual rights do you have as a business owner? Is your business going to get shut down for a month because this guy's brother-in-law is repaving the parking lot? Um, or do you have some sort of right where you can say at no point can obstruct entry to our business for a period of more than X amount of days, and I need X amount of days of notice to prevent an interruption to your business? Those are all things that should be in a commercial lease agreement. Um, what if they sell the property? Do you have a right to stay inside the property? And if they decide to sell the property,
Right.
or are you saying, I acknowledge that the landlord may choose to sell the property and terminate my lease? Is that
Right.
something that's in there? I don't know. We'd have to read it and look at it. The point is that you, again, back to step 1.5 on this deal, is you should have somebody in your corner that's reading those and looking at them and understanding. So that's, again, have somebody that understands that stuff. And then also too, with contracts, what people don't understand a lot of times, I guess there's probably two things I want to talk about. Is if you're texting somebody, sending something in a DM or whatever, you could very easily be drafting a contract. You could very
Yes.
easily be saying, "Hey, would you do this?" And they say yes. You've you've made an offer. Would you do this? They said yes, and you've got a contract. You know,
Right.
so what are the terms and conditions of that contract? So be very careful with what it would likely be for a court of competent jurisdiction. They would say what's commercially reasonable in this type of thing, and you have to hire experts, witnesses to testify, and this type of a supply contract or whatever. This is what would be expected. And the martial arts school owner said, made an offer for this guy to do it. This guy said he would do it, but you guys didn't say what the terms of that contract were, or what the exact value of that consideration would be. Well, you might be leaving it to a judge to say, sounds like about you should be paying him this much or whatever. And so
Right.
you don't want to create ambiguous, loose, silly contracts in your text messages. Be careful about what you're offering to allow somebody to do, or what somebody is offering to do for you. And
Right.
be thinking, am I binding myself or my company to some sort of an obligation? The next thing on that is that if you have a contract, there's something called a fully integrated contract. Most in the boilerplate language of most well-written contracts, there is a clause that will say this contract is fully integrated. Any previous or prior communications that were conducted before the execution of this contract are not included in the terms of this contract. So
Right.
if you've been talking with somebody, a vendor or whatever, and they're telling you all the great things that they're going to do and all the wonderful things that you're going to have, and you say, man, that sounds amazing. And then you sign the contract without reading it or without understanding it. And then you're sitting around and you're like, well, when are you going to start doing that one thing that you were telling me about?
Right.
And it's
Mhm.
not in the contract. They say, oh, well, that was a prior communication. We're not going to do that. You didn't add that to the contract or whatever. What you signed for was just A, B, and C. You didn't ask for, E, F, and G. So you get stuck with maybe less than what you thought you were bargaining for, because the contract will say it's fully integrated. So
Right.
understand what's going in, and understand that your prior communications don't necessarily mean they're a part of the deal. Now, the flip side of
Right.
that is that if you get into a contract with somebody, like for martial arts school owners, maybe your contract says that you're going to offer classes 3 times a week in, whatever your Tung Sudo program or whatever. And later on, after people sign their membership agreement, and then you make a representation after the contract was executed, that we are adding this here, and they agree, well, that's subsequent to the execution of the contract. Well, that would be enforceable because you've amended or added it to the contract, particularly if there was an exchange of new and good consideration for that. So
Right.
you can't do the other thing and say, well, it doesn't say it in the contract, because now it's not a matter of integration, it's a matter of amendment and revision of the contract. So it's important to understand how those things work and be a good communicator with the services that you're providing and the services that you're buying from other people.
I don't know. I'm just feeling like more and more all the time, I'm understanding why that $700 to $1,000 to set it up front is really valuable as you talk through these things, because it's like there's so many mistakes that can be made in structuring and setting up a business. It's unbelievable, right?
Oh yeah, it's pretty bonkers, what you can get yourself into, and it's like I said at the beginning, most people aren't going to sue you, right? They're just not. It's not in people's nature to do it. But there are people that will, right? There are people who are gonna sue you. Uh, there are people who are gonna say, and sometimes rightfully so, like, if we do something wrong, this isn't the Old West. We can't just take each other out, shoot each other in the knees, and pour whiskey in our wounds. You have a civil process for this, and it's like, hey, you made a promise to me. The only way that I can be made whole is it if you compensate me for your obligation that you broke or for the negligence that you had. um, and it is a well-intended system, but it's a system that you don't want to. It's a game that you don't want to play. So you might as well be smart and do things right on the front end instead of trying to fix them on the back end.
Right, right. Very cool. Well, what about like licensing, insurance type stuff? So talk to me a little bit about that.
That's going to be very state and jurisdictional specific. So in most instances, martial artists are kind of uh, self-governed in terms of their credentialing, right? And so you hear a lot of interesting stories about like kind of these, somebody would pop up with a fake black belt and something, and other guys in the community are like, "We're gonna go try a class at this guy's school," and you hear those like old stories about those types of things, but I don't think that's quite the case nearly as much anymore. But for legal purposes, most of the time, you can find that stuff pretty easily. And what they're doing in Waco, Texas will be something that is completely different in, Chattanooga, Tennessee, because it's just based on that municipality. So I would encourage anybody before you start a business to go, start at the bottom, start, with the city that you're in. Do you need any specific licensing or whatever? There's typically resources. Your attorney, back to step 1.5, your attorney is going to be familiar with those and say, hey, these are the type of licenses that you need for your type of business. A general contractor will have a different type of license than a martial arts school owner, and a med spa will have different type of licenses than a martial arts school owner. So reach out. There might not be anything, and I think in most jurisdictions there wouldn't be. Very little licensing at the municipal level. A lot of that's going to be, very jurisdictional, depend very much on the jurisdiction that you're in. Yeah. But it's worth talking to somebody that knows the answer. So,
Well, we're back to, like you said, 1.5, have an attorney that can kind of coach you and guide you that are familiar with your local laws and requirements, right?
right, right. And then,
Very cool.
license, did you say licensing and insurance?
Yeah, I touched on insurance. So, just the importance of having, your general liability and property, renter's insurance, et cetera, the things that you might need as a start a business.
Yeah. So something that is, the way insurance works. So insurance is a contractual agreement between the insured and the insurer. It's very heavily regulated. But your landlord will more likely than not have insurance on the building. Your stuff inside the building is not covered by his insurance policy. It's your property. It's not the landlord's property. And so your computers, your mats, your bags, your inventory, all of that stuff that belongs to you. It's not insured by the building's insurance policy. If that building burns down, if it's caught in a mudslide, whatever the case is, your insurance is not going, or your insurance policy is going to protect your property, not your landlord's. So you shouldn't say, well, this guy's got insurance. Moreover, if you look in your commercial lease agreement, there's probably contractual requirements that you have a general liability insurance policy, and that's with regard just to the property that you have in, just your personal property. But also, what about those other things we're talking about earlier with, premises liability and those types of things? You have somebody visiting your school. They're not even on the mat. They're just somebody's little brother, and they're running through the lobby, and fall, hit their head. They trip on the rug, in front of your front door, and crack their head open. It's like, okay, well, who's responsible for this? There's a whole legal analysis as to whether that was an unsafe condition. But in the event that you got sued, do you want to pay for your own defense and potentially their damages, or do you want to pay, $100 a month to make sure that that person's covered if somebody gets injured in your school? So get it, look at it. You know, this is something that people don't do, but they should. Is whenever you make that relationship with your attorney and you have insurance policies, and this is not just for your school, this is for your personal life, this is for everything. Take your insurance policy, not the declaration page, not the stuff that they give you online. Like, say, I want a copy of my actual policy, and take it to your attorney and be like, hey, what does this thing do? And what he'll do or she'll do is she'll flip through the first about 4 pages and say, okay, well, this is what you're covered on. And then she'll show you the other 85 pages of the policy, and she'll say, these are the exclusions. These are all the things that you're not covered for.
They're not covered
Yeah.
on, right?
And you'll find it's actually kind of a good time, at least for me as an attorney, to read through and see what insurance companies are putting in there. It's like damage from meteorites, not covered, but you can get a kicker for it. Damage from wars, riots, etc. There's lots of things that aren't necessarily covered. And your attorney can explain that stuff to you. Your insurance agent can too. But remember, and I'm not besmirching the insurance agents of the world, but they're selling you a product. So whereas, attorneys are also selling you products, but they're not selling you insurance. So, if you take it to them, an attorney has a fiduciary duty to you to say, this is what this contractual language means. And if you're planning on relying on that policy, it might be worth understanding what's in it. And if you don't understand it, to have your attorney talk with you about it. So you probably still won't understand it when you get to the end of it, but at least someone in your corner will, and they'll say, hey, this is a problem or it's not, So,
Right, right. Well, and I think we're back to 1.5. Develop a relationship with someone that you can trust. And I loved some of the stuff you said in the beginning of the podcast when you were talking about whenever you structured your business. We're a law firm focused on the results, not just collecting hours, right?
right.
And I think that matters. You have to have somebody that cares about you as a person, cares about your business to an extent, even if it's someone you hire to do that, so that they give you good information. So whenever, say, for instance, Cory reads my insurance contract or my lease agreement with someone, he actually cares. Like, I care what happens to Chip and his business, and I'm going to give him the truth about this. So that's powerful stuff. Develop a relationship with someone you can trust. And I also love what you said earlier about, you've got people right now, you've got cases right now that it's costing people like 15 to 30 times what it would have cost them to set it up right the first time, now solving the problem of not having set it up the first time. And I'm not trying to scare people out of a business either, but doing it right from the beginning, the less mistakes you can make, the better off you are in the long run. And the unforeseen costs in the future when you don't know what you're doing can be huge, right?
Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's counterintuitive. It feels like this should be intuitive for people in the martial arts community,
Right.
particularly people who are listening to this and saying, yes, I'm interested in starting my own martial arts school, is because martial arts at its heart, there's lots of competition, and there's competition gyms and schools, and I think that's great. And it's a very fun game, martial arts. But at its essence, it's about being prepared. And it takes a long time to make yourself proficient in martial arts. It takes a lot of
Right.
work. It takes a lot of, effort to do that. And most of us will not be in a life threatening self defense situation ever, but we will
Right.
nonetheless say, I'll train 3 to 5 times a week. I'll stay fit, I'll stay in shape, I'll let people practice punching me in the face while I practice evading that and, tying him up, grappling, or counter striking, or whatever the case is. But at the same time, we're reluctant to say, gosh, I've got this guy or gal who trained for 7 years, went to college for 7 years to be able to read documents, and to do this stuff. And it's just counterintuitive. Like, put
Right.
strong people around you so that, whenever business tries to punch you in the face, you have somebody there to kind of parry those punches.
Parry the punches or or counter them for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what I'd like to do right now is kind of go back through real quick what we talked about and just kind of highlight like step one, two, three, four, five, just one more time. What is it that someone looking to start their own, martial arts school business, whatever that is? Because honestly, like we said earlier, this is all transferable no matter the business you're getting into. But we're kind of leaning into the martial arts industry because that's kind of where we're at. So step 1.5, just kind of walk us through those one more time and let's summarize what we've hit so far.
Yeah. So, for full disclosure, I was just kind of, this isn't like a list that I have. It's just like I was just like
Oh,
shooting
sure.
from the hip here. It's kind of what the first you asked me what you do first. So, step one in my mind is decide that you're going to be a business operator, which means you're not.
Mindset.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you have to have a business mindset, which is a whole
Right.
other conversation. But you're doing this for sustainability, if it's a hobby, or for profitability if it is a business, and you have to have the critical mass necessary to teach martial arts at the level that you're aspiring to teach it, which is going to require certain resources, a certain amount of clientele, those types of things. If you're envisioning a beautiful school that's well run, you're going to have to be more than just great at martial arts. You're going to have to also
Yes.
be good at business. And so, yeah, I need to make that decision. I'm here to do this, or to break even on this thing, or at least make some money on it. But it can't come at the expense of your martial arts, right? We were talking about the
Right.
hamburgers. Like, I can make a lot of hamburgers really fast, right? But if they suck, nobody, like, what's the point?
Nobody's gonna buy them.
Right? Nobody's going to buy
Right.
those hamburgers. Likewise, you can make a wonderful hamburger that's not profitable because it's $20 a burger and it takes you 2.5 hours to make it one at a time. So,
Right.
the 1.5 was start building some relationships with key people that are important in business. I think the two big ones for people initially is, an attorney, who's
Right.
familiar with business formation, general liability type stuff, and a CPA, somebody that's going to be
Right.
standing in the breach between you and the tax man.
Well, can I just kind of plug something in there too? I think a third one is find someone that's in the business that you want to pursue that's ahead of you
Oh,
and
sure.
get to know them a little bit and maybe even shadow them in their business, some things like that. And there are a lot of guys like me out here that love when young martial arts school owners reach out to us and go, "Hey, I'm just getting started, or I've been going for 2 years and I'm just struggling. What do I do next?" And sit down. But I think that would be kind of a third person you could plug in there, or a third level to that is find someone in that industry. If you want to be you want to be a painter and build a business painting, find a painter in your community or a community close by that you could reach out to and chat with. So I would kind of caveat that a little bit in there.
Oh, I agree. And sometimes this is silly, probably an analogy, but I think, like, back in the day, whenever we were all like hunters and gatherers, who did people look to? They looked at the guy that had the big scar on his face, and you know, he'd gotten old. They're like, oh, that guy got old. It was pretty good. And, lifespan's 38 years or whatever average. So he's figured something out that maybe us young guys haven't figured
We need to
out.
right. We need to pay attention.
How exactly is he yanking those fish out of the stream, or keeping bears from eating them, or whatever? So, yeah, find somebody that's doing what you want to do better than you and build a mentor relationship with them. I think that's just, in general, just a lot good life lesson, and it's very much a part of the martial arts world too. uh,
Yes, sir.
but yeah, so that kind of 1.5 step, build up, make relationships, have some consultations with people professionally that can kind of guide you, whether that's a mentor, also, an attorney or and a CPA, and your mentor, it's very likely that he those scars that he has, like, he paid a high tuition, to get where he's at, uh, so he probably knows, "I've got a guy, or I've got a gal that can help you in this area," and, most business people are happy to see other people succeed and go out and try it and do it, and, they've learned a long time ago that it's easier to make more money and to do better with an open hand than it is with a closed hand. So those people are, uh, experienced business owners are typically very forthcoming with that type of stuff. And if they're not, you probably don't want to be mentoring with them anyways. Um, so yeah, build some professional relationships with those people that can kind of guide you. And then the next thing is start using those people, particularly your attorney and your CPA, and the next step of the correct formation of a business. There's two parts of that. One, how do I shield myself from those torts and contractual liabilities? And two, how do I have the best bang for my buck whenever it comes tax time? And your attorney and CPA should work together and should advise you in that area. And then once you get that business formation done, which includes a lot of things, getting your EIN number, getting your name chosen, registering it with the state, publishing it, all of those, there's all types of things that your attorney is going to do for you, establishing an operating agreement. If you have a business with a partner, having a buy and sell agreement that's enforceable. So in the event that there was any type of dispute between the business owners, or there was a business partner that died or became incapacitated for some reason, that business can flow and move between partners easily, that there's some sort of succession plan. um, then you go through that process, get the correct formation for you on both liability and tax side of things, and then after that, start being cognizant of the agreements that you're entering into, and having your attorney review those. Like, you're going to sign a lease agreement, you'll be surprised, whenever you're saying, "Oh, I'm paying 15, $16 a square foot for 2,000 square feet," and that's whatever it comes out to be. And I'm going to agree to do this for 5 to 7 years, which is common for a commercial lease agreement, or maybe even 10. Well, do you have a right to renew it? Do you have, right of first refusal to purchase that building if the owner wants to sell it? What are the terms around it? It's a big investment. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars to have over the course of a lease. Make sure you're not getting in bed with a landlord or into a contract that you don't want, that you want to be in, and that it's a viable thing. And sometimes just the terms of that contract will make it, not viable for you. So start looking at those agreements, thinking about them. Start keeping your head on a swivel. Ask the professionals around you, like, what would be the standard duty of care in my field for these things that I have in my business, so that our premises is safe. Do I have all of the correct licensure? Am I correct? Do I am I sanctioned by the city to be doing what I'm doing, or by the county, or by the state, or whatever? Am I correctly established? Again, your professionals will help you with that. um, and then you start using some, I hate to say it, but we don't always do it. Start using some common sense, like, probably having an extension cord strung across the lobby is not a good idea. All right, well, do I need to pay $350 to have an electrician put an outlet over here so we don't have to do that? Um, Start looking out for those things. Make sure your insurance is in good shape, and you're properly covered with your insurance. And then, last but not least, is uh, for martial arts school owners and any business. Anytime you have a front desk person, anytime you have instructors on the mat, anytime you have anybody working in your business, regardless of whether they're a contractor or an employee, or maybe just a really great parent who's always there helping out, because you get into an area of agency law, where we talked about you're bound by the contracts you enter into. And sometimes you can get into contracts without knowing it, in a text message or just in a verbal communication. But the people that you have around you can also, through agency status, enter your business into a contract. So if you have a front desk person or a receptionist at your school who's either answering the phone or whatever, and they say, "Oh, yeah, that's great. We will do that." Or, "Oh, yeah, that's great. We want that." Or, "Oh, yeah, you can have this," or whatever the case is, whether it's to a future customer or a student or a outside vendor. Um, if they have a parent agency, meaning that based on how the communications that they made were to those outside or third parties who are unwitting to the situation, even if you didn't want that front desk person to say, "Yeah, you can enter into this contract," if they do it, you could be stuck with it. You could be stuck with the agreements that your people make because of a parent agency. Um, Likewise, there is something called express agency, where if you, in front of other people, say, "This is John, John takes care of our equipment," right? And a vendor's there and he sees that, that's an express agency that you've created, that they take care of the equipment. And then John tells the guy, "Yeah, we would love to get 10, standing bags or whatever." You better be ready to pay for 10 standing bags, because it doesn't matter that you didn't tell John he couldn't do that. There was a express agency that was created by either you telling the third party or you telling John himself that he could take care of that kind of thing. And so agency is a big deal. I mean, it's be careful with who you put around you. And whenever you get people around you and you get to that point, make sure that you've explained to them what the scope of their authority is. Like, this is what you can and can't do. This is what you should and should not do. And then have those people not on a leash, but there just be clear communication and expectation as to what they can and can't do on your behalf or on the behalf of the business.
Right. Very cool. Well, man, that's a lot to think about to go out there and start up a business, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's worth it.
I agree.
It's totally worth it. Theodore Roosevelt, one of my favorite quotes. I said earlier I worked at Union Pacific, and I was in a position to where they call it golden handcuffs, where I was making a ton of money, high six-figure salary, had all of the benefits in the world that you can imagine, amazing pension,
Right.
a month of vacation every single year, plus every type of holiday you could think of, and I just didn't love the work I was doing.
Right.
It was very hard to do. And one day I was just reading a book or something, and I read a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and he said, "Far and away, the grandest prize in life is to work hard at work worth doing." And I was like, wow,
Right.
I make a great salary. I have a great life for myself and my family, but I don't feel like I'm doing work worth doing. And I know that there's something out there for me. And
Right.
I think for a lot of martial artists who are looking at starting their own school, I think that's probably the driving force is, I want to do work worth doing. Uh,
Right.
they're not saying, "I want to make $10 million." They're saying, "I know that this is important work. I know it's fulfilling work, and I know it's work worth doing." And according to Teddy, I mean, that's the grandest prize in life, is to do work worth, good work that's worth doing. And it doesn't have to be vocational. I mean, work worth doing is raising your kids, being a good dad, being a good husband,
Yes.
following God. Like, those are all things that is work worth doing.
Yes.
And this is just one area of it. And martial artists have a great opportunity to start their own school and do work that's worth doing. So good for anybody that decides to do it.
Absolutely. I love that. That was a good way to close out. All right, man. Well, we covered a ton of stuff, tons of golden nuggets. I think we probably have more. I'd love to get you back on and chat some more
Yeah,
into some different areas if you're
anytime,
willing to do so.
anytime.
And I'm super thankful for you. So I hope everybody out there enjoyed that. Subscribe, share it, like it, send us a message, and let us know what you would like to hear. And we're thankful for all of you every day, all day. See you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning into the Team Chip Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget, subscribe, share, and or leave a review, because we need you. We appreciate you so much. And without you, we can't make this happen. Remember, consistency is the key to success. So go out there and never be outworked.